Hello and welcome to In Focus here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Together with our reporters, we've prepared stories about unique initiatives and the individuals behind them. Today we're going to concentrate on Polish poetry and the non-obvious and interesting ties between Poland and Scotland. Polish fans of literature continue to celebrate Czesław Miłosz, the poet, philosopher and dissident. The man who searched for meaning and values even when surrounded by the greatest evils of the 20th century. Let's find out if his writing is still worth a revisit today.
Once a year, this beautiful park in the center of Warsaw turns into a hotspot for lovers of poetry. This picnic, organized by the National Library, has it all. A book fair, a theater performance, a scavenger's hunt, and a whole lot of notable guests. But above everything else, today is about celebrating Czesław Miłosz, one of Poland's biggest contributors to the world literary canon.
After Czesław Miłosz died 20 years ago, one of Poland's leading literary researchers said that the poet had endured all the hells and some of the heavens of the 20th century.
There is no capital of the world, neither here nor anywhere else, and the abolished customs are restored to their small fame. And now I know that the time of human generation is not like the time of the earth.
Miłosz was born in 1911 and died in 2004. In a symbolic sense, he was a witness to the entire 20th century. World War I, the Bolshevik Revolution, the interwar period, and then of course World War II. Imposition of communism in Poland and emigration, followed by many years in France and then the US. But of course, many people lived through the 20th century. What makes Miłosz important is that he not only witnessed all these things, he also attempted to describe them, and more importantly, to understand them. There is a belief that great poets go to purgatory after they die, which means for a while they are forgotten. I feel like now is the time for Miłosz to return after years of absence. In this day and age, I think we can find many inspiring threads in his writing, many topics which resonate with multiple modern-age crises. The poet lived in California for a few decades until in the 1990s he was able to return to Poland and began dividing his time between Poland and America. He would spend beautiful Polish summers in Krakow, and then in the fall he would go back to California. Must have been pleasant.
Grizzly Peak in Berkeley, California was his home, and it was a beautiful home, and he made it his home, including a very fat cat that always sat on his desk. But he did carry the vision, the memories of Szatania, of the family life that he remembered from Lithuania. So, which is what a lot of emigres do and have. They've got this conflict of the life that they left behind and the new life.
I think coming from a country like Poland, from our part of Europe, we have a certain obligation. Do we fulfill it? That's a different story. But I have noticed, as I've read my own poems, as well as English translation of other Polish poets, they were received as a novelty, in the sense that they brought a certain objectification of the situation, as opposed to only focusing on an individual's internal life. In his poetry book, Rescue, published in 1945, Miłosz famously wrote, "What is poetry which doesn't save nations or people?" The last room at the exhibition is called the Kraszyński Square. because in April of 1943, Czesław Miłosz, who was staying in occupied Warsaw, passed by Krzyżanki Square, just as an uprising was taking place just behind the ghetto walls. He saw a spinning carousel on the Aryan side, and this dramatic juxtaposition of the outside world, which continued to lead normal lives, people smiling and having fun, and just behind a wall there was smoke, gunshots, the burning ghetto. It shook him. That's when he wrote his most famous poem, Campo di Fiori.
I've been coming to these meets for many years. They are always interesting, not only from a literary perspective, but also a wider, cultural one. I had already been looking forward to this year's picnic, but when I found out it was going to be dedicated to Miłosz, that really got me excited. I remember when Czesław Miłosz received the Nobel Prize. We didn't find out about it from the press. We learned from Radio Free Europe. And we were surprised, as we had no idea such a poet existed. Miłosz wasn't being published in communist Poland. Nobody could talk about him openly, as he didn't toe the party line.
Czesław Miłosz was in his time, without a doubt, one of the greatest poets in Europe, or even the world. One sign of that was when he received the Nobel Prize in 1980.
Actually, the Nobel Prize was what made Poland aware of Miłosz. I'm talking about the average person, of course. Maybe intellectuals were aware of him. But I had nothing to do with literature. I worked in medicine. We simply didn't know.
Thanks to the Nobel Prize, Miłosz gained worldwide popularity, especially in the States, where he lived at the time. Suddenly and unexpectedly, his role changed, from a professor of Slavic literature at Berkeley to a widely known public figure, a member of an international literature community with its headquarters in Manhattan and maybe another branch in Paris. He traveled a lot giving readings, and his books were being translated into different languages. And even today you can find The Captive Mind in better bookstores in America. The Captive Mind was an attempt by Miłosz to both understand himself and explain to a Western reader why was it that Polish writers and intellectuals had fallen for the communist agenda. Was it fear, opportunism, or was there something more? Faith, hope for positive change?
Captive Mind is based on his own experiences.
We are now maybe at a turning point. It is true that we always live in a turning point. History is living in a turning point.
It could seem that when we talk about The Captive Mind, a book written 70 years ago, we're only talking about the old communist ideology being brutally imposed on Central Europe. For some, it was totally alien, while others were drawn to it. But today, the same mechanisms apply. Various ideologies speak to us, ask us to obey, and demand unwavering faith. What we can learn from Miłosz is how to have a non-captive mind, a critical mind, a mind which does not obey, but observes reality instead.
What is it in Ginsberg's verse in Allen Ginsberg's poetry that appeals to you?
Well, just the opposite of my temperament. I defined myself as a square. And Ginsberg said, well, you are not as square as you pretend to be.
Very nice.
Miłosz was a poet of fundamental questions, apart from the literary perspective, which could be insufferable for some readers. In his most important poems, he asks himself the same questions everyone else does. What happens after we die? Does life have meaning?
He was curious in the world around him, very much so. And he was very curious about what people felt, what people thought. He would ask questions.
The motif of the time is very present at this exhibition, as it was an important problem for Miłosz from the very beginning. It's quite interesting how little Miłosz evolved. Different aspects of his artistry developed with time, but those basic questions were already there in his first publications in the 30s. The mystery of time. Why does something exist and will cease to exist? And what will happen to it? And is there any chance we can keep it? Poetry was, for Miłosz, the only tool to bring back what had been lost. in a pure, ideal form.
Reality. What can we do with it? Where is it in words? Just as it flickers, it vanishes.
Our next story starts with the commemoration of two 18th century Scottish settlers at their burial site an hour's drive from Warsaw. Now, each year, the town of Yadów celebrates its links with Scotland: bagpipes, haggis, football and all. Our reporter David Kennedy was there to take it all in.
A group of settlers came to Yadów in the north of Mazowsza in the 19th century. A moment of contemplation in their honour is how the annual Scottish festival begins.
Actually, there were two waves of Scots who came to Poland, and it's well documented. The first wave came at the end of the 14th, 15th century, and they were economic and religious migrants because Scotland was in a very poor condition then, and they came to Europe, not only to Poland, but to other countries along the Baltic coast to try their luck, to seek a new life. And many of them became very successful in the economy and also in the military. And some of them even went on to serve in civil government. And later there was a second wave around about the 18th century who came across to take part in let's say the industrial and the agricultural revolution, and many Scots actually helped to show Poland, let's say, some more advanced agricultural techniques, and were very welcome.
That's really amazing story, I think. Count Zamoyski, who was owner of these lands, he invited Scottish settlers here. And unfortunately, this small cemetery, which left after them, this small cemetery was abandoned and totally destroyed. So 4 years ago, we as Yadów Historical Association, we've decided that we want to do something with this.
I would also like to welcome all guests, including the descendant of the settlers, Jacek Gowanlock, and his wife, who have come here to share their story and passion for Scotland's unique cultural heritage.
My name is Jacek Gowanlock, and I am grand of nephew of this person, Walter Gowanlock, living here. The brother of Walter Gowanlock, Robert, was my grandfather. And he was coming to Poland together with his brother Walter Gowanlock. In the last days of my father, we did very big journey to Scotland, and we spent there a few weeks visiting many places, and the places connected with our family.
I encourage everyone to stay and enjoy the sound of bagpipes, to learn Cayley, to taste haggis, and to listen to some fascinating panel discussions later on. Enjoy the festivities and have a wonderful day. His Majesty's Ambassador, Anna Clunes.
O flower of Scotland, where will we see your life again? Your rise or your life?
Your likes again.
Your likes again. That fought and died for your wee bit hill and glen that stood against him. Proud Edward's army and sent him homewards to think again. I've got a lot of Scottish friends, and for me to tell them that I represented Scotland today, it fills me with a great honour.
Now, and can you hide that badge for a minute?
Well, the thing is, I just came here because I wore this because we need a blue shirt. But all my loyalty lies within the Tartan Army.
I'm from the St Andrews Foundation. My name is Ian Layden. I've been in Warsaw for 22 years, and I'm also addressing the haggis, a Scottish poem about sausages. fire on his sonsy face. Great chieftain o' the puddin' race, aboon the maw ye tak your place, Pinch, Tripe or Thierm. Weel are ye worthy of a grace as lang's my airm. Your groaning trencher, there ye fill. Your hardies, like a distant hill. Your pen would help to mend a mill in time of need, and through your pores the dews distill like amber beat. His knife, see rustic, labour dicht, and get ye out with ready slicht. Trench in your gushing entrails bricked like ony ditch, and then, oh, what a glorious sight!
There are people who loves haggis, and there are people who doesn't love haggis. But I think that really interesting things is that we have dumplings with haggis, and this is another thing which shows this special connection of Yadów with Scotland. We have 4 concerts. It's not only 4 concerts, not only bagpipes, not only drums, but also Celtic music. We have also rock music. At the end of the day, there will be our local band, and they will play rock songs connected with Scotland.
Carolina, we've interrupted your practice here. What are you going to be showing at this festival?
We are from Tri-City. We are a dancing ensemble called Trebraruna, and we will be showing some Scottish traditional Highland dances and some also our contemporary own choreographies inspired by traditional Scottish dances.
We're in Poland, and you've got inspired by Scottish culture. What's inspired you to go in that direction with your dancing?
Well, actually, it's a very, very long history. Our dancing group is 30 years old at the moment. It started by a group of passionate young people in Tri-City around 1994. And it was a time where people were inspired by things like the movie Braveheart, by things like Irish dancing shows, Lord of the Dance. And that was actually the source of people getting inspired by this chance to do something so different from our local culture, so fascinating.
We, people from Yadów, we are really, really proud because it's really amazing story, and in that kind of towns, people usually think that there is nothing special, and I strongly believe that in Yadów and in each town, in fact, there is great history, and it should be discovered, and it gives amazing opportunity to not to look to the past, but to look to the future and to shape the future.
Years ago, the Nazis blew up the royal castle in Warsaw. Hitler himself gave the order, seeing the castle as an important symbol of Polish history and a crucial part of Poland's cultural legacy. But today, the royal castle once again overlooks the Old Town Square in Warsaw, and it is celebrating the 50th anniversary of its restoration. Our reporter, Gabriela Fesnak, visited the museum to find out more about its fascinating history.
The first fortifications were built in the 14th century, but it wasn't until the 17th century that the castle took on its current shape. It was the residence of Polish kings and hosted many historical figures, such as Napoleon Bonaparte in its later period. In September 1939, Germany attacked Poland. The castle was first damaged during the bombing of Warsaw on September 17th.
The fire sparked by the bombing severely destroyed the roof, which collapsed, damaging precious frescoes.
The fire was quickly put down, but it became apparent that it was time to remove as many of its treasures as possible. The head of the Polish National Museum, Stanisław Lawrence, oversaw the transfer of artworks, books, furniture, and other precious items to a safe location. The efforts continued until German troops marched into Warsaw with orders to destroy the castle.
Hitler had personally given the order to blow up the castle as the symbol of Polish national identity and history, as well as the president's residence.
As the Germans started to make preparations to demolish the castle, Lawrence and his team continued their efforts to salvage as much as possible. The Nazis looted everything they could, even tearing off doors and heating pipes to send them to Germany. Lawrence's team, however, made efforts to remove frescoes, tiles, stucco, everything they could, as they believed that the castle would be rebuilt once Poland regained its freedom.
Lawrence and his team began the second rescue operations, removing decorative elements, stucco, tiles, bas reliefs, anything that they believed could later be reinstalled during the restoration.
However, the castle, or rather its barren skeleton, survived for 5 more years, as it turned out that its demolition would have endangered a nearby bridge.
As the castle was near the Kierbecz Bridge, the Nazis decided to delay the demolition out of fear that the explosion would cause damage to the vital route across the river.
When the Warsaw Uprising began, the royal castle was among the first buildings taken over by the insurgents.
On August 1st, a white and red Polish flag was flown from the castle tower as a sign that Warsaw regained independence and was now a free city.
However, the uprising ultimately failed, and the castle, already battered in heavy fighting over the old town square, was demolished.
The castle became an area of heavy fighting and was severely damaged as a result. In September 1944, the Germans decided to blow the remains up.
Because the royal castle was indeed seen as a symbol of the Polish state, efforts to rebuild the castle were made immediately after the end of World War II. However, the Soviet puppet government was less than eager to bring the iconic landmark back to Warsaw.
Although President Bierut agreed to the restoration, his successor, Władysław Gomułka, believed the royal castle to be the embodiment of all that is evil, the reign of the bourgeoisie, the Second Polish Republic, which led to the country's demise. So, for Gomułka, restoring the castle was out of the question.
It wasn't until Gomułka was removed from power and replaced by Edward Gierek that the restoration finally began. Gierek, wanting to placate the nation after the bloodshed which preceded his term as the first secretary of the Communist Party, formally agreed to the restoration of the castle.
He thought that the project would take years and it would not be completed anytime soon.
But Professor Lawrence once again sprang to action, and a restoration committee comprising the greatest specialists in the field was assembled just days after the decision.
Thanks to the efforts of Professor Lawrence, both during World War II and afterwards, much of the castle's interior, including thousands of decorative elements, was preserved and ready to use during restoration.
The restoration was a grueling process in which thousands of preserved elements were meticulously collated with existing photographs and paintings to determine their previous placement. Especially the paintings of Bernardo Bellotto, better known as Canaletto, proved useful in the process. Preserved thanks to Professor Lawrence's efforts, they still offer us a glimpse into Warsaw that existed before it was destroyed during the war.
Walking through the castle, one can spot darker parts of the decorative elements. Those are, in fact, the original parts of the castle that survived the war.
Rebuilding the structure itself only took 3 years, but the castle was not open to the public until 1997. In 1979, the Royal Castle Museum was created and is now home to countless artifacts and works of art, including the royal insignia of Poland's last king, Stanisław August Poniatowski, and the heart of Tadeusz Kościuszko. It is indeed the very heart of Poland's historical and cultural legacy.
And with this, we conclude this edition of In Focus. Thank you for watching, and please stay with TVP World for all your latest news, updates and comments. Goodbye.